Hi everyone, it's Stephanie here with a video for My Favorite Things. In today's video, I'm going to be creating a card that was inspired by this card created by design team member Vika for the June 2017 release class. If you visit the resource section of the blog and go into the classes there, you'll be able to get a PDF for her card, this card here that she created. But when I created mine, I wanted to do the same idea as what Vika did for hers, but I wanted to do a little bit of a variation so you kind of have two different ways that you can use this fun framework background stamp. So in Vika's card, what she did is she stamped out the image and then she stamped it a second time onto a second piece of cardstock and used inking and then cut an image out. So in her instance, she used a heart. And then she adhered that heart directly back on top of the framework background on her card base. But for my example here, I wanted to show a different way to use this with the same idea in mind. So what I'm doing is I'm taking the framework background and I've completely covered it with Versamark ink. And now I'm taking a card panel here. This is a piece of watercolor cardstock and it's cut to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches. And I'm just going ahead and adding ink to this entire background. Now I'm really making sure to press down really firmly because this is watercolor ink and I am using the textured side. So I really want to make sure that that impression fully transfers over to the cardstock panel. And then what I'm doing is I'm adding embossing powder to the entire thing here. So this is white embossing powder. It is a little hard to pick up, but you can see when it tilts in the light that I have this background completely covered. And now I'm going to take my heat tool and fully emboss this whole background piece. Now that is what we're going to use for our card, but I want to create a little template here that we're going to use to design what we're going to do on the card. So I'm just taking some cement gray ink and I stamped it onto this piece of text paper. It's not stamped perfectly, it doesn't matter at all. This is just kind of a pattern for us to follow when we do our watercoloring on the panel that we created. So what I'm doing is I'm just taking some markers here. It doesn't matter what you use. I just wanted to kind of use the colors that I want to use when I watercolor. And I'm kind of looking at an image that I found online, and what I actually did was search for a cross stitch pattern of a palm tree. These little X's on this framework background here kind of remind me of cross stitching. So I found a simple palm tree pattern and I'm kind of looking at the picture online as I'm coloring in this image. Now I'm changing it up a tiny bit to work with the space that I have, but I'm just kind of coloring the different squares until I have what I feel looks like a palm tree. So hopefully that translated well and it actually does look like a palm tree here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to watercolor this image onto my panel that I've done the heat embossing on. So it does vary a tiny bit. I'm trying to follow the little pattern I've created as best as I can, but there are areas where I have to kind of shorten how many squares I use or different things here and there just because the panel is slightly smaller because I know I'm going to cut it down a bit. So I'm using Prima watercolors and I'm just going along and adding all of the color into the little squares with watercolor. Now I'm making sure not to do two areas that touch each other until I know that the other color area is completely dry. Having everything heat embossed kind of helps to hold that watercolor in the squares, but I didn't want to risk it. I didn't want to have any of that color kind of blend together. So I just thought it was easier to kind of move to areas that I knew wouldn't touch until I knew all of the areas were dry. So I'm just going along and I'm just kind of adding all of the color. I'm mixing up the different colors on the lid there in my watercolor palette, you can see. And I'm just kind of keeping all of the areas the same color to start off with. So I used one common color for the sand at the bottom. I used one common color for the brown in the tree trunk, and then I'm doing the same with the green and using one common color there. And I'm just going ahead and adding all of that color until I have the entire image completely finished. Now once I finish the green, I'm going to go ahead and add the detail to the bottom of the tree trunk since I know all those areas are dry. And you can see now that I have darker color going in, and this is what's going to give it some shading and just make this look really dimensional. For each of the areas that I had used the original color, I just kind of darkened those colors up a tiny bit, and then I'm going back in mainly to the bottom left corner areas of each of those squares and adding a little bit of that darker color to give it the shaded effect. And this really makes it look dimensional and pixelated. I think it is such a cool design, and I am going to have so much fun creating a bunch of different things with this background stamp. It's so much fun. So for the tree, I actually added a bunch of darker green squares as well. Rather than just do the shading, I fully colored a bunch of the squares. And that was just because I wanted to have the tree two different colors to make it look like some of the areas on the tree were shaded. Now the next part is completely optional. If you want to just leave the tree on a white background, I think that looks really great as well. But I really wanted to add sky detail to this entire thing. So I'm taking some aqua blue paint color now, and I'm adding this to the entire rest of the background. So any white areas that have no color in them, I'm adding the blue in. I did realize at the bottom I didn't want sky under the sand, so I finished by adding another layer of the sand at the bottom. And then once the blue was dry, I'm doing the same thing that I did before and taking it a little bit darker and adding a little bit of color to the left bottom corner of those squares. And that's just giving us the same shading and dimension that we got on the rest of the image. So once we let everything fully dry, we end up with this really great panel that has this fun design. I really love the overall look of this. I wasn't sure going into it if it would do exactly what I thought it would, but it actually exceeded my expectations, and I'm so excited to create a bunch of different designs with this background stamp. So what I did is I cut it down a tiny bit, and then I'm adhering it to a black cardstock panel, and this is just to really make those colors pop. And then I'm going to add that to a grout gray top folding card base. Now for the sentiment, I wanted to use this "You Are My Happy Place" sentiment. I thought it was really cute and went perfectly with the palm tree. So I stamped it onto a piece of black licorice cardstock with some Versamark. I heat embossed it with white embossing powder, and then I trimmed it down so it would fit onto my card front. I'm adding it over the tree trunk here with some regular tape runner, and then to finish off the card, I put a few clear sequins scattered around with some silver stickles in the centers. So that is the finished card today. I had so much fun with this pattern. I encourage you to try out different patterns. I would love to see what you guys are creating with this background stamp. I just think it has so many possibilities. Thank you so much to Vika for creating a card that inspired this card design, and thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next video.